up guys, this is Jamie from YGOCentral, and today I'm going to be doing a ban list prediction video. Yes, you heard that correctly. I'm going to be doing a ban list prediction video as the first video for this channel. Seeing as we're in ban list season, I thought it would just be appropriate. So, let's get on. So the first card that I feel will get banned, so outright just completely placed on the forbidden section of the list, is Magispector Kieran. The first reason for this is because it has inbuilt protection. Very much like all the other Magispector cards, it cannot be targeted by card effects and cannot be destroyed by card effects. So your opponent can drop a Raigeki and it won't die because the protection will keep it from dying. And then if your opponent tries to target it with an effect veiler or a breakthrough skill, they can't, because again, the protection is keeping it from being targeted. So regardless, it's basically invincible in that respect, apart from the fact it can't be destroyed by battle. Secondly, it is basically a compulsory evacuation device. It can let you bounce one of your own pendulum monsters you control and a monster your opponent controls, essentially putting them back to square one. Yes, that is not a reference to the spell card Back to Square One, but essentially does that by sending the monster that they normal summoned back to their hand, or an exceed monster that they just summoned right back to the extra deck. So that in itself is already quite good. And the last point that I feel will make this card at least bannable is the fact that it's a pendulum monster. Yes, it is level 6, but the fact that if you have a set scale of 1 to 8, you can simply pendulum summon this card every single turn, given that your opponent does not have a solemn warning or a solemn strike to negate the summon. As long as the summon is not negated, you're perfectly fine. But other than that, that's how it works, is that you can continue bringing it out and it becomes an obstacle for your opponent. So that in itself is a problem. So again, I personally think that this card is going to get banned. And of course, to back myself up a little bit, the OCG have already banned it, and specifically it was already a problem in the OCG. So from what we can see, the OCG have a more broken card lineup than we do, and they're having problems with Magispector Kieran. So if they're having problems, guaranteed we're going to be having problems, and chances are the card's going to get banned on the next list. So there is basically no discussion there, it's just going to be. But again, I don't know, I'm probably just hallucinating, but again, that's what I think, because Magispector Kieran is an annoying card. It constantly comes back every turn and you've got to deal with it, and you can't target it, you can't destroy it by a card effect, so it's always going to be a threat to you. So moving on to the next card that I feel is going to get banned, and I never really thought I'd ever say this, but it's Bahamut Shark. And the reason why I feel Bahamut Shark's going to get banned is quite simple. Totally Awesome. It's access to Totally Awesome to any deck that can make Bahamut Shark. Bahamut Shark, being a 2 water level 4 requirement, is quite easily fulfilled, especially in decks like Mermails or Elemental Heroes. Just generally heroes for that matter can easily make Bahamut Shark and abuse Totally Awesome. Not to mention that Totally Awesome can return any water monster. So say if your Bahamut Shark was destroyed before Totally Awesome was, you can return that Bahamut Shark, and if you're playing multiple Totally Awesomes, you can just summon another one off. So again, that in itself is already broken. Like, some people will disagree with me and say, oh yeah, it's fair, there's nothing wrong with that. No, Bahamut Shark is an older card, of course released back in Abyss Rising, and its only known reprint is the Gold series. I think it was like Premium Gold 3, and that in itself is already out of production. So realistically, Konami aren't making any more money from the older sets that it came from. So Abyss Rising, Premium Gold 3, I'm pretty sure it's Premium Gold 3. So realistically, they are not going to ban Totally Awesome outright, because Totally Awesome is still a very recent new card. They're going to want to try and promote it and milk it as much as they can before they go and do something to it on the list. Unless it was really groundbreaking, then I can see that happening. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. That's basically the bottom line. So with that in mind, I personally feel like Bahamut Shark is going to take the hit because they can't hit Totally Awesome just yet. Just to stop the accessibility to Totally Awesome in all the different water decks. I mean, even if you just run the one water monster and run Instant Fusion and Norden, you can easily get a Bahamut Shark out and abuse Totally Awesome from that. So other than that, that is all for the forbidden list. That's all I want to see banned. Now, I'm probably missing a lot of cards that a lot of other people would like to see getting banned, but for me, those two are the only cards that are causing problems, because realistically, I just cannot see Bahamut Shark staying at 1 or even at 3, just because of how easily accessible it is and how it makes Totally Awesome accessible to any other deck. That's the one reason I feel that it needs to be hit, so that it will stop other decks from being able to abuse Totally Awesome, because Totally Awesome in itself is a problem. And of course, because they can't ban him just yet, they're just going to ban the card that's causing the issue. And of course, Bahamut Shark is causing the issue. So getting rid of that, and that being like, you know, the core threat of it all, and also keeping to their sales, it will obviously just be a better alternative than just outright banning Totally Awesome straight up and then them not being able to make money, because then Bahamut Shark will lose its purpose, and then of course, you know, no one will need it anymore, and Totally Awesome, obviously no one's going to go after it if it's banned. So enough of that, let's get on to the limited section. So what I'd like to see limited is Solemn Strike. Now, just like all of the other Solemn cards, of course excluding Solemn Scolding and Judgment, all the other Solemn cards have been hit to 1. And of course, it's not just that makes me feel that Solemn Strike is going to get hit. The other reasons is because Solemn Strike in itself is such a good card. It's a 1500 life point cost, either to negate a monster effect or to negate a summon. So that can be an Xyz summon, or that can be a Pendulum summon, and that's just great. Like, I would pay 1500 to negate a Pendulum summon. Heck, you know, I don't know why you wouldn't. I mean, and it's ran at free as well. It's ran at free. That's ridiculous. I mean, you know, we all feared when Solemn Warning was at free, and that was pretty bad. Now we've got Solemn Strike, which I wouldn't say is the equivalent of Solemn Warning, but it's close. I mean, realistically, it can't negate spells or traps, but it can negate monster summons, and it can also negate monster effects. Which, again, the only known card that I know that can do that is Solemn Judgment, and of course Solemn Judgment is currently banned. And pretty much that's my only reason. I mean, yes, it's pretty bad when you're going second and you just draw it, because your opponent probably went off already and the Solemn Strike is already pretty much useless. But if you're able to clear their board, given that scenario, and then have the Solemn Strike set, you are in a very favorable position, because if they try to go all out again, you can just negate their summon, and from that point cripple their play. And then at that point they either have to wait a turn, in which you could just OTK them, or they just scoop and concede the game because they can't do anything. That is the problem with Solemn Strike. Maybe I'm, you know, not educated enough to know, because again, I don't really play in big events or anything. Like, I mostly play with friends and people at locals, and you know, I can see that Solemn Strike has its own relevance, and it is a crazy card. Like, it's not as good as Judgment, but I would say that it's just, like, you know, just slightly lower down in the ranks, if you get what I'm trying to say. So keeping it at free, I just feel is unrealistic. I really think that they're going to knock it down to 1, because then it means that it can be played alongside Solemn Warning, like Solemn Judgment used to be played alongside Solemn Warning. And at the very least, then, you know, it's not as unfair as it is now that it's currently at free. But then again, it's very debatable, and you know, people will probably look at it and think, is it worth you know, limiting, or is it worth, you know, keeping it free? You know, they might even semi-limit it for all I know, but again, we won't know until we've actually see the list, which of course Konami still haven't given us, but that's besides the point. So moving on to the next card. The next card that I want to see limited is Union Hanger. Now, the reason Union Hanger needs to be limited is because it is just a mass plus. It's a +1 when you place it onto the board. It's a +1 when you normal or special summon a machine light type Union monster, because you then get to equip another light type machine Union monster to that monster, in which case that is already a +2. Like, that isn't even fair. Yes, that really helps ABC, you know, speed up the process of getting ABC Dragon Buster, and that, you know, it makes it less bricky. But the problem is the fact that it's so easily accessible. And the fact is that if you have that on board, even if you top deck an ABC, you know, any of those, you can just normal summon it and you'll still get Union Hanger's trigger effect off, because specifically you'll be able to equip another Union monster too, which I don't think is very fair, because it's already a plus in itself, and it just makes summoning Dragon Busters so much easier. It's a great card, I will give it that, and it's probably too good for the ABC archetype. But again, if it was limited to 1, that would be a good number, because then they have to work with playing 1. They're not having to play with 3, which they know, oh yeah, I can just constantly, you know, keep abusing it. And yeah, you know, that seems all fair, right? I can just keep abusing it. Every turn I'll activate 1 and I'll keep searching. I'll keep deck finning, because that's how, you know, ABC work. They deck fin. They try to get the A, B, and C into the graveyard as quick as they can. And, you know, obviously Union Hanger gives them that ability to do specifically that, which it's good in a way that the mechanic itself is helping ABCs, but then it just makes ABCs a little too powerful, because they always have a power play. Even if you wipe their board, they might be able to just get another like Union monster and then summon it and then get another one. So if they're missing a B, they can normal summon, say, an A and equip the B from the deck, and then they've already got all materials to go to Dragon Buster again. So I personally feel that that is a problem, and I feel that that's the reason why the card needs to be hit. And ABC have been doing very well at large events, so for it to get limited is no surprise. So that's the reason why it's on this list. I mean, alternatively, you could say they could limit Dragon Buster instead. I mean, that would mean that the ABC deck would have 3 Union Hanger and 1 Dragon Buster, but that would mean that they'd have to work around trying to get Dragon Buster out as quick as possible and make sure that they don't waste it, because it means that if they manage to lose the monster, they're gonna have to somehow get it back, or basically they're gonna have to be playing rank 4 spam from that point, because they can't make any more Dragon Busters than that. Oh, but again, they can't ban Dragon Buster because it's not really, you know, good enough to be banned specifically. Like, if they ban it, it's gonna kill ABC. If they ban Union Hanger, it's gonna kill ABC. So putting Union Hanger at 1 but leaving Dragon Buster at 3 seems fair, because that way, you know, you're not going to see so much field spell abuse. I mean, I've seen some people say Terraforming needs to get hit, but realistically, if Terraforming gets hit, it's a bit stupid because it's a generic, you know, search card for field spells, and, you know, it does help some rogue decks. So if they go and limit Terraforming or ban it, well, ban is a bit of a, you know, over exaggeration, but if they go and ban it, then I can only see that, you know, a lot of rogue decks are going to die specifically because of that. Because, again, there are a number of different archetypes that play field spells and rely on them. And if Terraforming goes to 1 with no way to search them, the deck becomes very slow. So limiting Union Hanger seems to be the most sensible option. But again, we don't know what Konami's thinking. They could be thinking of other things. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. And the next card that I feel needs to get banned, well, not banned, but limited, is Dante. Dante, Traveler of the Burning Abyss. Now, I know a lot of people have been wanting Dante to get hit ever since the Burning Abyss deck was doing well. And let me be honest, it was doing well right from the start, right from when Burning Abyss was just released from Duelist Alliance. It was doing very well. It didn't have many support cards, because the only known support cards were Traveler, Seer, Skarm, Graf, Dante. 5 cards specifically, and they were already doing well. And don't forget, at this time there were free tour guides available, so the deck was already doing very well. The fact that Dante lets you mill to gain attack, and then also lets you get effects off from the graveyard, is just so good. Like, with Burning Abyss Pure, it's great, but it's not as good as the Phantom Knight variant. Now, the reason why the Phantom Knights are good is because the Phantom Knights that you play are all level 3, and Silent Boots, the one that can special summon itself, obviously you get that plus, say, an Ancient Cloak or a Ragged Gloves, and then you overlay and make a Dante, in which case whichever one you decide to detach will always have an effect in the graveyard where it will banish itself to do something. And when you mill, if you mill any of their Phantom Knight trap cards, even the spell cards, they all do something in the graveyard, either reviving a Phantom Knight or becoming Exceed materials for an Exceed monster. You're not negging in that respect, if that's even a word that you can use. You're not kind of going minus. Whilst with, like, you know, regular Burning Abyss, if you mill stuff like Calcab or Farther while your opponent doesn't control any spells or traps or any monsters on the field, you go minus from that. But with the Phantom Knights, if you mill the Phantom Knights, they don't technically have an effect as soon as they're milled. Rather, they get their effects by being activated. Basically, the Phantom Knight variant is very effective, and that's probably the one reason I feel that Dante is going to get hit, because just all round, Dante is a great card. The fact it mills 3 cards, gains 1500 attack, and then after it battles and survives, it turns to defense, and it's a big 2-5 wall. So your opponent's going to have to try and get over a 2-5 wall that's basically going to be sent to the graveyard, and then it's going to be allowed to float as well, because when it's sent to the graveyard, you can add any Burning Abyss monster from your graveyard to your hand. Well, not even a Burning Abyss monster, it's a Burning Abyss card. That's nuts. Like, you can add Fire Lake back, you can add Traveler back, you can add any spell or trap or monster that has Burning Abyss in its name. So that alone is just incredible, because there's so many, you know, pluses that this card has to it, and it just puts you in a very good position if you have it already. And whilst we're on the topic of Burning Abyss, another card that I feel needs to get limited is Speedroid Teratop. Now, Speedroid Teratop was widely played in Phantom Knight Burning Abyss, and of course, it is basically a better version of Tour Guide, because you can special summon it as long as you control no monsters. Then once it's either normal or special summoned, you can search a Speedroid monster, to which you search Speedroid Taketomborg, which Taketomborg, it can be special summoned if you control a wind type monster, and they're both level 3. So that gives you instant access to Dante or any rank 3. As far as I'm concerned, with Zodiacs coming out next set, MX Saber Invoker plus Speedroid Teratop is going to be the next main thing, because you just go Speedroid Teratop, search Taketomborg, Taketomborg Special, overlay, make Invoker, and then Invoker, detach, special summon Momorat, and then you basically go off with your plays from that. And so, as it was already a problem in the Burning Abyss Phantom Knight format, I feel that Speedroid Teratop has probably had enough publicity and will probably get hit, and at least limited to 1, because at that rate it won't be as prominent anymore, and we won't see it as often as you would if it was at 3. And it's just an unbalanced card in general. The fact that you don't even have to sacrifice your normal summon to use it, I think that in itself is just nuts. That's the reason why Teratop needs to be hit. But some people will disagree because it'll kill Speedroids, but then it's like they limited Tour Guide, and that kind of really hurt Burning Abyss. So, you know, it's just that equivalent, honestly. I guess it's quite a stupid comparison, but it's just what I think anyway. And I just feel like that, you know, Teratop does need to be hit. It is just unbalanced. The fact that you don't use normal summon is just nuts. I mean, if it used your normal summon, then I would understand. I mean, people are comparing it to the new Predaplant that does exactly the same thing, and even lets you search a fusion-based card. So that would be like Instant Fusion, Brilliant Fusion, any card with fusion in its name. But if you consider it that, you know, you have to actually normal summon it, and you have to discard a monster to special summon the other monster from the deck, that is more conditional than Speedroid Teratops, where, oh, he just special summons and then gets to search. So you're not even using the normal summon, but with that Predaplant you do. So yeah, enough of this discussion on Teratop. You know, it's just my opinion that I feel that Teratop will get hit, because it's also in preparation of Zodiac Beast coming out in the next set, as they're going to be abusing it just as much. And the last card that I feel that's going to get limited is Anti-Spell Fragrance. It is essentially the pendulum equivalent of Vanity's Emptiness. It basically prevents pendulum scales from being set on the scales, and you basically can't do anything. I've seen a few friends who have tried to play into Anti-Spell and try to get over it and hope to draw the Twin Twister so that they can set it and then on their next turn be able to blow up the Anti-Spell. But unfortunately, you know, with Anti-Spell being a floodgate card, it just becomes such a annoyance and it just stops them from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And realistically, Anti-Spell Fragrance, being that we were in a pendulum heavy format, I would definitely see it being hit at least to 1, just because this is Konami. They are taking their so-called stance on floodgates, so the chances of, you know, Anti-Spell Fragrance being hit to 1 is quite likely, because again, the fact that we were in a pendulum format, I was surprised it didn't get hit. But then again, we haven't had a list for a little while, so again, until that comes out, we won't really know what's on the list. But again, as I said at the beginning of the video, this is just a prediction. And again, it's quite stupid. Anti-Spell Fragrance is a very stupid card in itself. The fact that it can just stop your opponent from being able to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That's ridiculous. So moving on to the semi-limited section, what do I think will come back to 2? Pretty simple. One card that used to be called a staple, Torrential Tribute. Now, the reason it got limited to begin with was because of its disruptive nature and the fact that you were able to disrupt your opponent whenever they were trying to make a big play. You basically just punished them by flipping it. And unfortunately now, I've been told that it's been demoted from being a staple. So I personally feel like if it's no longer a staple and doesn't see as much prominent play, that it may be able to come back to 2. And obviously, now that there are so many cards that prevent destruction and have inbuilt protection, similarly to Magispector Kirin, I feel that Torrential Tribute plays very little to no part in the meta anymore, so I could definitely see this card coming back to 2. The same can be said about the next card, which is Compulsory Evacuation Device, and the reason why I think Compulse could be brought back to 2 is because it targets, and of course there are cards in the current format that stop you from targeting. And so with that in mind, it means that Compulsory is not that good of a card anymore. I mean, yeah, if your opponent brings out like a Utopia the Lightning, you can bounce it. But again, it's like you already kind of go -1, I guess, in a way. I mean, your opponent goes more minus, but, you know, if it prevents targeting like Magispector Kirin or Cosmo Dart Destroyer, then Compulsory Evacuation Device is pretty damn useless. So I feel that this card could possibly come back to 2. It was good during like Dragon Ruler format and formats before, you know, non-targeting cards were introduced. But other than that, I just don't think it's going to make, you know, any relevant appearances at any big events. So it could potentially come back to 2. Now, the next card that I feel will come back is Reinforcements of the Army. This card was originally limited because of Satellarknights, and of course, as we know, Satellarknights won Worlds, and of course, Worlds is kind of like a meta-defining event where if a deck wins, and it like wins the event, then, you know, they need to look at what card was prominently played during that event, and then they will basically hit it. And apparently Reinforcements of the Army was the choice that they decided on taking and basically limiting. I mean, they could have hit Deneb, they could have hit Altair, but wisely they went and took Reinforcements of the Army just to slow the deck down but not kill the deck entirely, which was a very smart move on Konami's part. But now we barely ever see any warrior-based decks that can play anymore. Like, the only deck that I see that can play Reinforcements of the Army is ABC or Heroes, and Heroes are well represented. And realistically, like with Heroes, they already have E-Emergency Core. With ABC, they just use Reinforcements of the Army to search the Photon Thrasher from their deck. So realistically, there's no real like use for Reinforcements of the Army other than searching for that Photon Thrasher, honestly. And with Heroes, they just normally use it to search Goblinberg just so that they can use it to special summon Shadow Mist so that they can get the effect to search a Mass Change. Other than that, I could definitely see Reinforcements of the Army coming back to 2. But again, it really depends on what Konami want to do. And it, you know, of course, for me, I play Satellite, so I would love for Reinforcements of the Army to come back to 2, just because it would really help the consistency. Because again, right now, Satellite are very, very slow, and of course, you know, they require a lot of setup, and of course with decks nowadays that can just OTK in 1 turn, very hard to play through. That's why we play so much back row, because being able to survive those turns is vital, because being able to make like the Dark Tellarknight to go into Trigger is very important. So yeah, that's the one other card that I feel that could come back to 2, because it is just a great card, and at the same time it's not really seeing many relevant appearances at any big event in any decks other than Heroes and ABC, and ABC barely even use it anyway. They just use it for, as I said earlier, for Photon Thrasher. And the last card that I think will get semi-limited, and it's been on the list for so long as limited, and has just lost all relevance, I just don't see it being relevant anymore to the meta, is Book of Moon. Now, Book of Moon has been on the list for so long as I remember, because to my knowledge, I don't think it was even at 2 or 3 when I started playing, because I started playing during Gear, well, not even Gear format, I was playing when Return of the Duelist first came out, and yeah, there was no like 2 or 3s of Book of Moon. Rather, we only saw it at 1 always. So I guess Book of Moon has always been limited to 1 no matter what. And I just feel now, as I mentioned with Compulsory Evacuation Device, because it targets, it's not that great of a card and doesn't show any relevant appearances, and it doesn't have any relevance to the meta either, because again, because it targets, it's a bad card. That's just the thing. I mean, yeah, it's good like to disrupt your opponents like Synchro plays or their Xyz plays, but if the monsters that they're summoning cannot be targeted by card effects, then Book of Moon is kind of pointless. A bit like why Ring of Destruction is barely seen in play right now, because Ring of Destruction is just a bad card in general, and just the errata has kind of ruined it as well. But hey, that's another topic for another day. But yeah, that's exactly the reason why I feel Book of Moon could possibly come back to 2. And not to mention, it's considered a minus, because when you use it on your opponent's monster, yeah, you flip it face down, but then you've just lost a card in order to do that. Yeah, it might have stopped them from attacking you for game, but you've still -1'd. So in a way, it's probably not as good as you think. So moving on to the unlimited section, what do I think could come back to 3? The first card that comes to mind is Dragon's Ravine. Now, Dragon's Ravine was specifically banned because of Dragon Rulers. Now that the Dragon Rulers are now banned, I feel like Dragon's Ravine could be brought back to 3, because we've already got it at 2, and the only deck that really benefits from it is Dragoonity, the one deck that it was designed for. And Blue Eyes don't really need it, because, let's be honest, with Blue Eyes they already have their Light Mausoleum, so Mausoleum itself is already a good substitute for Dragon Ravine, and doesn't really benefit Blue Eyes as much. So, seeing as Dragon's Ravine doesn't really have any kind of relevance in the meta right now, and probably will never have any relevance, because Dragoonity as a deck just isn't good enough to compete, I feel like Dragon's Ravine definitely could come back to 3, and I would like that, because I play Dragoonities myself. So, you know, I would love to have that card back at 3 in the deck, just because it helps for consistency, and, you know, it just gets me them Duxes to my hand quicker. Just having 2 is a bit problematic when your opponent just decides to Twin Twister or something, because once your 2 copies are gone, that's it, basically. I mean, that's just the problem with field spells in general. But the fact that it's a 2 and is not doing anything just kind of dawns me, because it's like, the card ain't doing anything, so why keep it at 2? But again, this is Konami, they've never really made much sense. The second card that I could see getting unlimited is Wind-Up Magician. And it's pretty simple why I think this card will come back to 3, and it's because Wind-Ups aren't going to be doing anything. Wind-Up Carrier Zenmighty is going to still be banned by the time Wind-Up Magician comes back. I mean, Magician just came back to 2 last list, so I can only see that now that Wind-Up Magician isn't doing anything, or Wind-Ups in general just aren't doing a thing to the meta, I can only see that Wind-Up Magician is just going to be placed on the Unlimited so that, you know, it can be played at 3 again. I mean, until Wind-Up Carrier Zenmighty comes back to 3, you can't really pull off the Wind-Up Hunter loop, which, you know, obviously the hand loop was one of the things that made the deck good. Secondly, we're in a very quick format now where it's basically all about OTKs, and cards like Dimensional Barrier can really cripple Wind-Ups, as as wind-ups only play is to make Exceed monsters, so you just flip up the dimensional barrier and call Exceeds, and that's it. The whole game's over, because then, you know, wind-ups can't even compete, because they can't even do anything for that turn, and then all their Exceed materials will just be wiped out by your monsters next turn. So yeah, wind-ups just have no chance of, you know, being good again. So I feel like Magician could definitely come back to 3 now. Dark Hole's another one, and it's mostly the same reason that I feel Torrential could come back to 2. I feel Dark Hole can come back to 3 because Dark Hole, of course, being a mass destruction spell card, is the same reason why I feel Torrential could come back to 2, because they both destroy, and there are so many cards in the current meta that basically prevent destruction or have inbuilt protection to prevent you from destroying them, that I just can't see Dark Hole being a crippling card like it used to be from the old days. When in the old days it was a very crippling card, you had a full board of monsters and then all of a sudden your opponent drops a Dark Hole and that's your whole board gone. Back then it was all about vanilla beatdown and all that, and you know, cards that didn't have protection, but now you've got all these inbuilt protections, you know, like, oh, non-targeting, non-destruction, you know, all of that kind of just builds up, and it kind of makes Dark Hole a bit irrelevant as a card, because yeah, you can wipe out a board, but you're also wiping out your own too, so it's kind of like a very skillful card, because you need to know exactly what you're doing, because if you're wiping out your own board, you know, you need to make sure that you have a follow-up play, because if you don't and you're just Dark Holing for nothing, then you're actually going minus for no reason at all. So again, Dark Hole could really come back to 3, but as I said before, Konami might bring it back, but Konami might not. And the last card on the list that I feel could come back to 3, and just because, you know, of course the type of deck that it's played in is not very popular and I don't really see it often, and from what I could see, it doesn't really make any tops at big events, is Thunder King Ryo. Now, Thunder King Ryo came back to 2 last list, I think, and of course, yes, it stops searching. Your opponent and yourself cannot search and cannot add cards to your hand, you can only draw them. However, you can't really use the card in any real deck like that's currently out, like Metal Foes or ABC. You can't really run them, like run Thunder King Ryo in that. I guess you could side it if you really wanted to. I mean, I guess you could play it in Satellite, but again, as I say, personally for me, I just can't see Thunder King Ryo staying in 2 forever, because we're in a format where searching isn't like as important. Like, I say that now, I'm probably going to get blasted by a bunch of people in the comments saying, wow, you don't know anything about this meta, you noob. But realistically, you know, with Thunder King Ryo, it's like, yes, it was good during Necros format because Necros was all about, you know, searching and all that, but there are certain formats where Thunder King Ryo is just irrelevant and just doesn't do anything. And I'm pretty sure that now that we're coming up to the Zodiac format and we're coming up to True Kings format, that they don't really need to search. I mean, if you summon Thunder King Ryo, sure, that's great. I mean, they're just going to summon something and batter over it. That's pretty much it. And like, the only real decks that can use it is anti-meta decks like Barrier Statues, or just generally like, you know, D Fisher, Macrocosmos Beatdown or something like that, or Banisher of the Radiance Beatdown. Something of that nature would be the only kind of decks that I could see that would actually really be doing anything with Thunder King Ryo. Other than that, I just can't see Thunder King Ryo staying 2 forever. I could possibly see it coming off the list next list when we get it. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for content in the future. That's about it. This is Jamie from YGOCentral.